All right, Alexander, let's talk about the situation in Kosovo, Metohija, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I believe I am, and Serbia. And of course, if we're going to be talking about this, we probably have to talk about the European Union, NATO, the United States, Russia. We've had comments from Maria Zakharova as well as the president of Serbia, Alexander Vucic. We had Anthony Blinken was in Albania, I believe, a couple of days ago, and he has also met with the leaders of this this breakaway province, or if you are the United States, a recognized country, depending which side you fall on. We had tensions rising up, Alexander, just Sunday, in the day of Sunday and Sunday evening. I'm actually in Belgrade right now. I arrived at the same time that all the tensions just happened to spring up over the weekend. So what are your thoughts as to what is going on?
Yeah. Let's just clarify on the position of Kosovo. It is not a member of the United Nations. Many, I believe, in fact, most countries around the world don't recognise its independence. I might be wrong about that. And several members of the EU do not recognise its independence as well. So, in the EU and NATO. So it is far from being a fully internationally recognised
Cyprus,
country.
Greece, Slovakia, Romania, and Spain.
In Spain, exactly. So it's not, it's not. It is an entity, but it is an entity that is heavily supported by the United States. The United States maintains, I understand, a big military base there, and of course the European Union is fulsome in its support of Kosovo, even though, as I said, there are several EU member states which don't even recognise it. But the Commission backs it, Germany backs it, France backs it, and outside the EU, the US and Britain back it. And of course, Serbia, by contrast, is this country which has long historic connections with Russia. Now, I'm going to express a view, which is that I think this particular crisis, which has been brewing up for several weeks, it's basically an attempt by the Kosovo authorities to restrict registration documents and identification documents used by ethnic Serbs who are concentrated in this northern region of Kosovo. It's an attempt to basically interrupt the use of these registration documents. It's been brewing up for some time. It was expected that it would really start off in the autumn. The Kosovo authorities have brought it forward. They've made an attempt to do it over the last couple of days, right in the middle of a crisis, at about the same time that, as you said, Blinken has been visiting Albania. Albania and Kosovo share the same ethnicity. There's strong political links between the two. It would be unsurprising if in fact, it would be astonishing if a green light were not given to the Kosovo authorities to do this. And I've just read a long piece in the Washington Post in which the Prime Minister of Kosovo talks about the brave fight that his country is making against Russian imperialism. So he's trying to equate the Serbs with the Russians, and he's appealing to all that sort of rhetoric. Now, I think, in spite of all of this, that we're going to avoid an armed clash. I think that the Serbs have rushed military forces to the border. I think they will take action if they're obliged to. But I don't think we're going to see this thing tip over into an outright battle. And Vucic has his allies within the EU system, and I think he'll be working the phones. That's the president of Serbia. And I think that this situation will be de-escalated. And I'm getting some reports, very, very, hazy reports, but they're suggesting that there has actually already been some sort of a de-escalation. What the exact form of that's going to be, I don't know. But in the long term, this is an unsustainable position. And I want to repeat what I've said many times in multiple programs. The West's interventions in the former Yugoslavia have left us with a deeply unstable situation. They've created a Serbia which remains powerful, strongly connected to Russia, but surrounded by deeply unstable micro-protectorates, NATO protectorates, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Bosnia, all of them very unstable, all of them with lots of problems of corruption, organized crime, you name it, and with Serbia having irredentist claims over all of them. Sooner or later, perhaps later rather than sooner in the case of Kosovo, there is going to be a smash. And this event that we've just seen, this attempt to try and create, I think, to stir up the situation between Serbia and Kosovo at the present time, and one has to suspect that this is partly connected with the the Ukrainian events. In other words, it's an attempt by some people, if you like, to open up yet another front. This event is just going to be one more step towards that eventual smash, which is bound to come. Now, I don't know how soon that will be. I don't know what form it will take. But this is inevitable because this whole situation in the Western Balkans is inherently unstable.
Right. So the latest news that I've got is that Kosovo has delayed on this registration initiative that they moved up. So they've delayed it. They haven't canceled it, but they have delayed it. We also have news, by the way, that a week ago that Kosovo said that they're also going to apply for EU membership as well, according to the foreign minister of this breakaway province. She came out with Danica Gervala came out with statements saying that Kosovo meets all the prerequisites in terms of legislation, human rights, democratic standards, and rule of law. So my question to you is this document replacement that the Kosovar authorities are pushing for. How is that? How does that fit into international human rights and a breach of international human rights?
Oh, I mean, it does because first of all, I should stress again that this is in the eyes of much of the world an illegitimate authority anyway. Yet it is trying to force people to Serbian people to take on documents which would be seen by those people as a denial of their identity. So that there is already that issue. There's also the issue about how the Yugoslav wars were ended. At the end of the NATO intervention in Yugoslavia, against Yugoslavia in 1999, there were a series of agreements. There was even a UN Security Council resolution. That has been violated extensively, and that would be an even further violation. Now, a UN Security Council resolution is, of course, a part of international law. But over and above and beyond that, human rights law does provide for protections of people's identities, ethnicities, their connections to their home, their feelings of being themselves, and these are clearly being violated. And I would say that this is clearly an infringement of their human rights. Now, of course, Kosovo people will disagree, so will all kinds of Western jurists, but that is absolutely my view. Even setting aside all those, treaties, agreements, Security Council resolutions, which I was talking about, as a straightforward issue of human rights law, I think this violates it.
Okay. Richard Grenell, who worked at the Trump White House, and actually he was the point man on dealing with the situation in Kosovo, he slammed the Kosovar authorities for what they're doing. He also said this has nothing to do with Russia, and he was very upset with the fact that they wanted to push forward with this document replacement policy. So he was very upset with that, as was Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman for Russia. And she also said that this was a breach of human rights, and that the Kosovar authorities, under the tutelage, under the mentorship of the United States, the EU, the collective West, they were the ones that were pushing this forward in order to provoke a kind of second front, or in order to provoke tensions vis-a-vis Serbia, which has remained a supporter of Russia. And Serbia has managed, I would say successfully, to balance Europe, of which they are surrounded by EU nations, with their support for Russia. They have, whatever your feelings are about Vucic, because I know there are people that like Vucic, or people that don't, but he has, for the most part, been able to walk that tightrope between the EU and Russia. How is this different, or how is this similar to Crimea, to Donetsk, to Lugansk? Because even Putin cited the recognition of Kosovo by the United States when he talked about, I believe, Crimea, but definitely when he talked about the Donbass as well. I mean, how? Because everyone always has that question, okay, well, you have Kosovo and you have these ideas about Kosovo, but then you have a different opinion about Crimea, or you have this opinion about Crimea, but you have a different opinion about Kosovo. I know there is a lot of nuance, and I say this as someone from Cyprus, because we could also have this discussion with Cyprus as well. What are the differences and the similarities between Kosovo and Cyprus and Crimea? And, we can broaden this out to many disputes. So what are the differences, the similarities? It's a tough question to answer, because we could probably do a 3-hour live stream on this, a 6-hour live stream. But can you sum things up in 5 or 10 minutes to close out the video?
I think it's actually extremely straightforward about Kosovo's status. And I explain it in this way. When Kosovo declared itself independent and the Western powers recognized it, the Serbian government brought a claim to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, saying that it was contrary to international law. And I think it was. I think straightforwardly it was a clear-cut violation of international law. Not just, by the way, domestic Yugoslav law, but also Security Council resolutions, international agreements, all kinds of things, which clearly said at the time when the Yugoslav War of 1999, the one that NATO waged against Yugoslavia, NATO agreed at that time, the US, Britain, France, Germany, all the Western powers, agreed at that time that Kosovo was still a part of Serbia, of Yugoslavia. Anyway, what then happened was that when Serbia brought that case at the International Court of Justice, the US and the Western powers mounted a massive lobbying campaign, and to many people's astonishment and private horror, they got an opinion out of the International Court of Justice, the so-called, or rather the infamous, advisory opinion on Kosovo, which said that international law, as is commonly understood, treaties and all that, domestic arrangements within countries, none of that matters. If a country is able to break away, if a region is able to break away from a country, then the only test of whether or not it is legal or not is whether or not other countries recognize that breakaway as legal. And on that basis, the US, Britain, or France, the West have argued that Kosovo's independence is in fact legal because they've recognized it, and that makes it legal. So Putin has said, well, if you apply that logic to Kosovo, why are you refusing to apply that same logic to Crimea and Donbass? Why are you saying in that case that, if the, whatever, internal arrangements within the Ukraine and all that, if that doesn't matter, because, in Kosovo's case, it didn't matter. And if, Crimea breaks away, and if Donbass breaks away, and countries recognize it, and increasing numbers of countries are now recognizing for example, Donbass's independence. I mean, not big countries, but, significant ones. And of course, Russia has recognized them. Why is sauce for the goose the Kosovo goose, not sauce for the Donbass gander? And of course, you have absolute radio silence about this from the West. They absolutely categorically refuse to engage with Putin and the Russians with this, because of course it's impossible. It's impossible to say that the position they took over Kosovo somehow is consistent with a completely diametrically opposite position that they've taken over Crimea and Donbass. In the one case, they're saying one thing. In the other case, they're saying the total opposite. So that's, I think, I've summed it up very loosely. I should say that I thought that judgment by the International Court of Justice was wrong. I know lots of people think so, but it was the judgment the Western powers obtained, and they applied to Kosovo, but they won't apply it to Crimea or Donbass. Now, let's just turn to Rick Grenell. Now, Rick Grenell, nobody would say of Rick Grenell that he is any kind of moderate person. I mean, he's not, by any stretch of the imagination, somebody who, is soft on foreign policy. He's coming along and saying that what the authorities in Kosovo are doing is a mistake and a massive provocation, and one that could provoke a crisis at this particular time. Well, you can be absolutely sure that that is not just his opinion, it's the opinion of an awful lot of other people. Now, I am absolutely sure that somebody, and I agree with Maria Zaharova about this, somebody decided things are not going well for us in Ukraine, we need to distract the Russians' attention, we need to create some problems in the Balkans that will upset the Russians, that will mean they'll lose their focus, their single-minded focus on Ukraine, and at the same time that will enable us to open a second front against them. I think what a lot of people, Rick Grenell being one, people within the European Union, some people within the European Union being others, have said, this is absolute folly. We would not be opening up a second front against the Russians. We would be opening up a second front against ourselves. We would light a fuse, a fire, which might scorch the whole of the Western Balkans. Remember what I said, that this is not a sustainable position. And at a time when we're heavily bogged down with a crisis over Ukraine that is not going well, we absolutely do not need this at this time. And I'm sure there's lots of people saying this in the background, and that's probably why we see Kosovo starting to pull back. So I think this is the key. Grenell's comments explain what is happening at the moment. Now, of course, with these kind of things, there's always these bureaucratic battles which go on in Washington and in the Commission. We see that the hardliners tend to win these battles. As I said, Grenell is not a soft liner, but he's more realistic about this than some other people are. But it's always a risk that, our usual friends, our old friends, the Newlands, the Kagans, all of those people will be able to start this up again, and we will see it explode. I don't think so. I think the coalition of people in the West who want to keep this thing under control is too strong. I think also that within the EU, they do not want to see Vučić put in a position where he has to clearly take sides, and where conceivably his whole position in Serbia might become undermined, because they know perfectly well that whoever replaces him would be much more hardline than Vučić himself is. So for all of these reasons, I think that we're going to see this thing de-escalate. But it's, again, a further example of how dangerous the international situation has become. and of what a very dangerous administration we have in Washington, one which lights fires instead of putting them out.
Yeah, just on a final note, I mean, the State Department, Blinken, and also Sullivan at the National Security, these people are completely out of control. And that is the God honest truth. They are completely out of control. And God help us, someone with logic and reason in the Biden White House at this moment needs to rein them in.
Absolutely.
Quickly.
Absolutely.
Because they're trying to drag us into World War III. At all costs.
Yes.
And I just believe that there are some sane voices, relatively sane voices, who said, you know what, Serbia is ready. Vučić gave a very good statement, I believe. He said he called for peace. He called for the Albanian population to use logic, but he also said that Serbia will indeed act, and they are ready, and they will protect the Serbian people. I thought that was a very good statement that he gave. And I also believe there are a lot of people in Europe who are saying, by the way, Russia also said that they will come. I've heard a lot of people in the Russian government who said they will come to Serbia's defense as well. And I think people in Europe, they heard these statements and they said, you know what? We don't need this.
Exactly.
We don't need this in Europe. We don't need this hitting our economies at this moment. Yeah. You think things are bad now, the economic situation? Can you imagine something flaring up in the Balkans? And I also think they know deep down inside that Russia is not using 80% of their forces in Ukraine, that they're only using 10% of their military muscle in Ukraine, and that Russia absolutely has the military resources to come to Serbia's defense. Yeah. I think they know that.
Absolutely.
And I'm 100% sure that probably scared them to death.
Yes.
But really quick, Alexander, your thoughts on that. And just to summarize your point on human rights before we close out this interview, the differences between Crimea, Cyprus, Donetsk, Donbass, and Kosovo, you're simply saying that the collective West, they got an agreement from the court to say that when a region, a territory, a province wants to break away, all that is needed is for that province to declare it.
Yeah.
And then it's a done deal. Am I summarizing that correctly? Because if that is the case, Spain, Romania, Slovakia, so many countries, Italy, I imagine so many countries would be like, my God, this is a disaster.
Yeah, it's a disastrous precedent, and you're absolutely right. The only thick qualification is any country can any region can break away from any country, provided it gets international recognition. It is the international recognition, supposedly, by other countries that makes the secession legal. Now, I thought it was a bomb.
If China recognizes Florida, an extreme case, if China were to recognize Florida breaking away, that would be the precedent?
Absolutely, it would be. I mean, I thought it was an incendiary.
In general.
By the way, they based it on, believe it or not, the American Declaration of Independence. That was the precedent they cited, because America broke away from Britain and got recognition from France. That basically explains, the reasoning behind all of this. Of course, Britain, at the end of the American War of Independence, recognized U.S. independence. So already you see the difference. And there were lots of people in Britain at that time, by the way, including much of the aristocracy, by the way. This is a bit of a byline on our history, who actually supported American independence for all kinds of reasons. But I'm not going to go into all of that. But that was what the International Court of Justice said, the advisory opinion on Kosovo. I thought it was disastrous at the time. I thought it was utterly misconceived. I thought that they mixed up also the issue of a national self-determination, which is something completely different. But it's the judgment the US and Britain especially campaigned for, because at that time the US wanted Kosovo to become independent and thought that it could use that, I suspect, to leverage pressure on Russia and China, which of course have various ethnicities. Remember, this was obtained at the time of the Chechen situation, was unresolved. And of course, China has issues in Tibet and Xinjiang and all those sort of things. So the US thought that it would work for its own advantage. And of course, in reality, it is a disastrous precedent from every conceivable point of view. But there it is, we're stuck with it. And as Putin repeatedly says, you apply it when you choose to. You use this law, the West uses this judgment when it suits it and forgets it at every other time. So you can't argue on the strength of this decision that Crimea's unification with Russia or Donbass's declaration of independence are somehow illegal, because your advisory opinion on Kosovo says the opposite. But of course, they never, as I said, they never address that question. They always ignore it.
Got it. Short-term thinking.
Absolutely.
Short-term thinking, yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. The Duran.locals.com. Duran Shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.